Well, folks, we finally made it to the end of Tom Holland's Spider-Man Home trilogy. Not that this is Tom Holland's final Spider-Man movie. No, we have Brand New Day coming out. And before I get my review out for that tomorrow for you guys, we still have one more live-action Spidey flick to cover. That, of course, being Spider-Man No Way Home. No Way Home.
She told me that with great power
comes great responsibility.
Uncle Ben said it.
It's insane for me to think this movie already came out almost 5 years ago, and it's also crazy considering it only came out 2 years after Far From Home, whereas not only were there a bit of rights issues, where Marvel for a couple months lost the rights to do Spider-Man anymore and it all went back to Sony. Thankfully, obviously, they worked that out in time, but we also had a fucking global pandemic happening. Still, nonetheless, in 2021, we got Spider-Man No Way Home, and despite whatever troubles led up to making this movie and getting it finished, I have to admit, this is easily one of my favorite Spider-Man movies. If you've been following these reviews, then you know upon my rewatch of the Tom Holland Spider-Mans, they really haven't clicked with me all that much. It just doesn't really appeal to my sensibilities anymore. Not only do I feel like those first two movies were lacking the epic emotional gravitas of Spider-Man, but they were also just honestly kind of annoying. Whereas Homecoming and Far From Home felt somewhat episodic, like not much of note happened in those movies and they really were just lighthearted high school comedies. Spider-Man No Way Home is the first Tom Holland Spider-Man film that actually feels massive and substantial, emotionally cathartic, like things of real consequence happen here, even before all the previous iterations of characters start coming into this movie. I feel like right off the bat, Jon Watts must have learned from some of the criticisms he may have received from the first two. Not that those movies were panned by any means. I feel like I'm one of the few people who happens to not really enjoy them that much. But still, I feel like there's immediately a sense of directorial energy here. The opening scene of Spidey swinging MJ through New York trying to evade all the citizens who are trying to go after him just immediately opens the movie on this chaotic, relentless note. I also think the scene right after in Peter's apartment, all done in this one-er take of him running around trying to frantically not let Happy or Aunt May figure out that his secret's been revealed, is really fun and actually pretty well directed. I feel like there's a really solid flow and pacing to these scenes that wasn't really present in the previous two films. Again, maybe it is just because things of substantial circumstance are really happening, which is nice to finally get that in this Tom Holland Spidey series. Right afterwards, we have a really nice cameo from Matt Murdock, played by Charlie Cox. He's not the only MCU character that makes an appearance. We also have a pretty decently major supporting role from Doctor Strange. And with the use of these characters in the movie, I actually don't have an issue with. I know I was complaining a bit in my Far From Home review about how I felt that film was too heavily interconnected from the events of Avengers Endgame and didn't really feel like a standalone Spider-Man movie as much as it did the 20-something episode of the MCU TV show. But I'm totally okay with other Marvel characters just appearing and having a genuine part to play within Spider-Man's story. Not only is that more reflective of the comics, but I feel like the roles Doctor Strange and very briefly Matt Murdock play in this movie really are succinct to this story. You don't need to know who they are, where they come from, or what happened in their movies to watch this film and appreciate its story. And while Matt Murdock's appearance was a really fun bit of fan service, I will say I definitely have some issues with how Doctor Strange is portrayed in this movie. He comes off very thoughtless, inconsistent. The way we use him to set up the multiverse getting ripped open and all these previous characters coming into the MCU just feels yet again extremely contrived. For being someone with his level of knowledge of the occult and magic, as well as his status quo as Sorcerer Supreme, or I guess former Sorcerer Supreme in this film's case, I really have no idea why he didn't sit Peter down and have a really in-depth discussion where he asked him very specific questions about this reality-altering spell before he went and did it, and why he just went along with what Peter kept on requesting over and over again if he knew there would be such cataclysmic consequences to it. I mean, he would have had to have known that, right? Being Doctor Strange? That whole setup does admittedly seem rushed to me. I don't know why they couldn't have thought of a better, more sensible excuse for colliding these continuities, but in the end, I guess I'm not quite as bothered by some of the logic issues present in the script in this film as I was in maybe some of the other movies, because I feel like this is going for just this big, dumb, fun, fan-fiction-y fan service movie. And frankly, it really fucking works. The appearance of a lot of these previous characters doesn't feel like gratuitous fan service, but like it actually plays a role in the narrative. I will say some of the returning villains are a little bit inconsistent with how much I think they work in this film. Alfred Molina is great as Doc Ock. It's fun to see him return. I can't help but feel like they flanderized his character a little bit, even though we did see him become sort of a cartoonish villain at points in Spider-Man 2. I feel like we saw him combating a bit more with the tentacle AIs in his brain, whereas here he's just a straight up angry, evil curmudgeon. And I also can't help but feel like they largely use him just for comic relief here. Still, if you don't take all of that super seriously, which I don't think the movie is really trying to be taken completely seriously at every point, but is more just going for like a really dumb fun spectacle, then largely it's fine. I'll say even though his design might be tweaked slightly better, the lizard weirdly looks worse in this movie than he did in The Amazing Spider-Man 1, which he already looked awful in that movie. I can't help but feel like they maybe cut certain corners here creatively, whether that's due to it being made during the pandemic or just the fact that there are so many actors and so many large set pieces in this movie that certain things had to be a little bit cheaper and shitty looking. I'm not quite sure, but the lizard is really lame in this movie. Thankfully, he's not in it a lot, but when he is here, he's often just shrouded in shadow. Like, I feel like they knew he looked kind of like crap. And Electro, I mean, I guess he's fine. I think that this was a case where they were trying to sort of remedy certain criticisms people had with him in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, whereas in that film, it was just this crazy Dr. Manhattan type design, and he was just this total cartoony, nerdy character. Here, even though they have the lizard address that his personality and look is totally different now, and they do explain why his electric abilities are different because he's using a different universe's energy source. They don't even try to explain why human form Electro looks totally different now, even though he is still Jamie Foxx. Even his personality is much more suave and cool. Now he's extremely handsome and has this nice haircut, and it's just really weird. Doesn't fit with the continuity of The Amazing Spider-Man whatsoever. There are a couple other continuity errors here and there. I don't think this movie's main focus was trying to be completely consistent with the continuity of these previous universes. Again, I think it was really just trying to have fun. And because this was something really new at the time, sure, now multiverse superhero shit is kind of an over-redundant norm. It had never been done to this effect at this point, and really, all things considered, they take advantage of that premise and really do some cool shit. Thomas Hayden Church also returns as the Sandman, at least his voice does, because it's just a fully rendered CG Sandman, which again is a little bit inconsistent with Spider-Man 3. There's also some very obviously repurposed shots of Sandman later on in the movie that are just taken directly from Spider-Man 3. And of course, the coolest, most satisfying returning villain, in my opinion, would have to be Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin. This was a case where I feel like they remedied the whole costume design from the original Spider-Man, and they thought, hey, why not just show Willem Dafoe's face emoting? He already looks kind of like a goblin. Which was a super smart decision that was totally a critique I had of the original 2002 Spider-Man. Willem Dafoe slips right back into this role. His Green Goblin voice is still exactly the same. He knocks it out of the park. We also get a lot of Green Goblin in this movie, which is really cool. It feels like he really is kind of the central antagonist. I seem to remember hearing Willem Dafoe only agreed to do this if he could do all of his own stunts, which is so cool. There's a really awesome fight between Tom Holland's Peter and Green Goblin in a hallway that's really awesome, and you just see Willem Dafoe doing these fucking wrestling moves on him. So while the first two acts of this film were certainly entertaining and a large step up in quality from the previous two Spider-Man films, once we get to the point that everyone talks about this movie for, and because we're 5 years separated from it, I'm just gonna spoil this as much as I've spoiled the rest of the Spider-Man movies leading up to this. Once Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire come back as their versions of Peter Parker / Spider-Man, oh my god, I can't even begin to describe the amount of giddiness I felt when I first watched it and still feel when I watch it to this day. Because once again, these aren't just gratuitous little cameos for fan service, they're fully supporting characters in the film. We get tons of screen time of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, and the scenes of the three Spider-Men all interacting, it feels like they really took advantage of this premise. I couldn't believe what I was seeing when I first saw it. I still can't believe it now. It is so fucking cool that we have a movie like this that exists. I never thought I was gonna see Tobey Maguire return as Spider-Man again. That's my fucking childhood Spider-Man. And I have to say, the scene where Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire are consoling Tom Holland right after Aunt May was killed is one of the all-time greatest scenes in this entire Spider-Man franchise across all 8 movies. Despite this script perhaps feeling a little rushed, I cried. I cried multiple times during this movie. And that scene especially, you really felt like it was the culmination of all these movies, spanning generations of fans. Whether your favorite version was Tobey or Andrew or maybe even Tom, I feel like there was some unity sitting there in the theater where you could all come together the same way all these Spider-Man came together and just collectively have that feeling of, hey, we all love Spider-Man, and this movie is just honoring our love of Spider-Man. The movie itself feels like a love letter to every version of Spider-Man. And because Tom Holland has now gone through this immense tragedy and weightful character journey across these movies, and especially now after losing Aunt May, I feel like he has finally been built up to be a valid, worthwhile version of Spider-Man, who now has the same amount of depth as the previous versions. The fact this movie juggles that much and is able to pull it off so successfully is such a crazy feat that I'm willing to forgive a lot of its logic issues. I also feel like No Way Home sort of proved that the issues with some of the previous Spider-Man movies wasn't overabundance of villains like we saw in perhaps Spider-Man 3 or Amazing Spider-Man 2, because this movie has more Spider-Man villains than any of the other Spider-Man films, yet it still remains focused. I never once felt like this movie was doing too much at once. It sort of always followed Tom Holland Peter's journey. His journey being a completely satisfying arc throughout this film. Is the third act final battle sequence ugly looking? Honestly, yes, it looks kind of bad, but there's enough rich character stuff going on throughout the action. It never once becomes a turn your brain off CG slop type final battle action scene, because it's all character driven and the 3 Spider-Men are constantly conversing throughout all of it. So I was still able to find it entertaining. And yeah, seeing how these 3 Spider-Men operate and work together and communicate is just really fucking cool, super satisfying. Seeing Tobey fall into this mentor role and stop Tom Holland from killing the Green Goblin and just giving him this look of, I know exactly what you're feeling, and I promise you this is not what you want. All said purely through his expression. It's great. It's an awesome moment. I will say once again, once Doctor Strange gets roped back into this, he yet again acts really inconsistent. When Peter poses the idea of erasing everyone in the universe's memory of Peter Parker, only now at the last possible second does Doctor Strange show any skepticism. Considering how he was just previously characterized earlier in the movie, you'd expect him to be like, alright, fine, I don't give a shit, fuck you, kid. But no, it actually takes him a little bit of convincing. I think Tom Holland Peter's goodbyes to Ned and MJ are actually really heartbreaking, and it made me realize, you know what? Despite my problems with the previous films, I've actually kind of grown attached to these characters, I have to admit. Yeah, this ending does obviously raise a lot of questions for the implications this has on the universe surrounding it. So now that everyone has forgotten who Peter Parker is, does that mean the previous broadcasts of the Daily Bugle, where they were just discussing Peter Parker was Spider-Man, are those also erased from existence? Has the timeline itself been altered so that there's just no proof of Peter Parker anywhere in the world? Is there just an empty room in Aunt May's apartment now? Characters still have clear memories of Spider-Man. Even Happy Hogan at the end at the grave mentioned he knew Aunt May through Spider-Man, but that was directly because he had such a personal relationship with Peter Parker. So do these characters just have false memories now? None of this is even attempted to be explained. Maybe Brand New Day will make some attempts at explaining it. I hope it does. A lot of those logic issues, especially regarding this ending, are pretty frustrating, honestly. I feel like they could have just thought it out a little bit more and it would have made a lot more sense. But in the end, does that really change my emotional response to the amazing, spectacular, ultimate web of moments in this movie? Fuck no. And look, I will be the first to admit I am absolutely the most biased film critic ever. I don't really believe in objective quality when it comes to art. To me, everything that matters is the emotional experience you have as you're watching a movie. Sure, it's fun to analyze, critique, pick apart films. I feel like there are many positive things that can come from that, and it's also just naturally the way my brain works. When I'm watching movies, I'm just always paying attention to nitpicks here and there. What can I say? I'm very autistic. But despite its problems, I fucking love this movie. And every time I watch it, I have a very strong emotional reaction to it. This is one of the best Spider-Man movies. I love it dearly. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Now, all that's left to review is Spider-Man Brand New Day, which is about to come out. And full disclosure, if you've been following this series of reviews, for new releases, I will not spoil anything. So you don't have to worry about it. You can watch my Brand New Day video without having seen it. I promise you are safe. I may or may not end up doing a spoiler video for it at some point. Who knows? We'll see. I see other reviewers doing shit like that. That review is coming tomorrow. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you have a... Oh, what the fuck?